Hello and welcome to the Heart of the Interview. Thank you for joining us. My name is Michael Fryer. By way of introduction, a little bit of background. I've been interviewing for quite a few decades. I began as an elementary school teacher with a master's in constructivist theory, early childhood development. That involves interviewing each child individually in the classroom to ascertain their current academic level, their interests, what they want to work on, and then building plans to move them forward. It is an interesting area to be in for no other reason than children don't want to participate. Trying to get them to talk about their academics, and even when it's information you want, it's stuff that they enjoy, is not necessarily the easiest thing to do. I then went from there to working for Child Protection Services, Department of Children and Families, and that involved interviewing or working with children and parents who had been through very traumatic events, and to get them to talk about what had happened, what was going on, and what needed to be done in order to kind of extricate themselves from that situation. Made more difficult because most people don't want to deal with it. They've already been traumatized. They don't want to talk about it anymore. They just want the situation to go away. Particularly when you have children that have been moved to foster care, they just want to go home and be with their parents. So getting the information out of them about the events that happened and what needed to be done to go forward, it requires an interesting skill set. After I graduated law school, I then represented that same population. So I'm defending the parents involved in the CPS, or I'm advocating for the kids, and that means more information, more delicate information, particularly when it comes to sexual abuse, particularly when it comes to representing the perpetrator, the alleged perpetrator of the sexual abuse. Getting the information out about what happened and what was going on. So again, it's a kind of a refined skill set that can be applied to our situation, working with dual diagnosed, justice involved clients who are looking for housing, because we've got to get the information out of them that they are uncomfortable with, that says, hey, in order to make sure your housing is long-term and successful, we have to know what it is you're going through. We have to know where you've been, and to build that kind of plan to get you where you need to go. So that in mind, any interview really kind of follows that traditional communications model. It looks like chaos because communication is chaos. You have the person who's sending the message. What is their psychological state? What is their emotional state? How are they feeling that day? What has happened to them? How do they feel about the person they're communicating with? The physical context, the environment, is it chaotic? Is it neutral? Is it calm? What noise? And noise is physical noise in the environment, but it's also the other things going on. For instance, trying to communicate with someone these days with, conflicts going on, both societally and internationally, can impact the way that you message, particularly if you're talking, let's say our person sending the message is a Republican and the person on the other side of the message is a Democrat. That's going to impact how that message is sent, what words are done. That kind of noise, contextual noise, can impact. And again, for the receiver, they're going to decode that message in a way based on all of those same things: the psychological context, the physical context, the noise in the environment, what's happening, and then of course their own internal. And then they're going to respond back. And nothing can kind of elaborate on this model more than just changing one single element. And if I make that receiver sad, this kind of conveys to you the impact that emotion alone can have just on how you receive messages and then send them back. That sad person saying, "Fine, thank you." We've all been there. You're trying to get information out of someone that doesn't want to share. And then, if I make them both sad, this creates, a TLC channel kind of docudrama of the week with, this, I'm sad or mad and sending the one message out, and I'm sad or mad and sending it back. We've taken this from a model and moved it into its own little story. Communication, this is the standard communication model, which is your verbal language, the words that you choose is only about 7% of the actual message going out. The tone of voice you use, and you, again, think about it, your day-to-day life. You can say the same 4 words, how are you, but how you say them conveys so much more about what you're actually saying or asking. And of course, body language as well is over half, because we respond to body language almost entirely, which is why most people want their Zoom and Teams calls to be on camera so you can actually see the other person and the expression on their face or their body language, because that helps to understand how is my message being received and what is, how are they conveying that message. But this is a communication model based on conversation. This is not a communication model for interviewing, because in interviewing, you are trying to get specific information out. So the verbal language actually does increase because the questions and the words you are using are very important, and you try to get that information out of the interviewee. So this is a great model for understanding that communication occurs in three parts. And you need to, as an interviewer, be very conscious of your tone of voice. It's why most professional journalists have a very neutral, if not neutral to slightly friendly delivery, but are very conscious of how they sound when asking. And again, body language, being very neutral about your body language. Don't take aggressive postures or defensive postures, because you are now conveying even more information to the interviewee about what's going on. Now, very important about this and a lot of the information I'm going to share going forward. This is not a comprehensive list, and it's not a deep dive into this information. I'm hoping that you take everything that you're going to get from this video, and you're going to go out and do a ton of research and reading and watch more videos and read articles and maybe even get a book and read that, because this information is incredibly important, but it's way too much to convey in just a quick, less than an hour. So take this, go forth, do some research. It's really interesting stuff. Not only is tone of voice and body language incredibly important, but there are some other interview issues that come in, particularly cognitive bias. So this is a broad term of art. The two I'm talking about when it comes to interviewing are cursive knowledge and cursive experience. So cursive knowledge is your education. When you're dealing with addicts, particularly in the dual diagnosed or mentally ill, you have an education, you have a background, and you're bringing forth with you all the filters, all the barriers, all the knowledge that's coming forward. So when you go to interview, you will be making assumptions. You will hear certain things and jump to conclusions. You will do all the not great things when all you're really ultimately trying to do is get information out of that individual. You are attempting to find out who they are and hear from them what they need. Your knowledge is going to come into play later, after you've gotten all that information out of the interviewee, in building that plan and working on, on how to get stable long-term housing. The cursive experience is, hey, I've been doing this 20 years. I've been working with alcoholics for 20 years. I know how this goes. You don't. You've got 20 years experience, which is great, which applies after the interview. But during the interview, these two things need to be put aside while you sit and listen to the person you're interviewing tell their story and tell you what it is they need in order to be successful. You then take your knowledge and experience and build that bridge later. So how do you avoid cognitive bias entering into your interviewing? One of the best ways that I have found personally is mindfulness. Now, again, I'm not going to give a whole deep dive into what mindfulness is. There are tons of people far more proficient and expert in this area that can do much better explanations and really drill down on this. There are books and articles and everything else. But essentially, mindfulness is being present and understanding one very important thing. When we see 1 + 1, 1 + 1, of course, equals 2. But 1 + 1 also equals 1. And that occurs with, for instance, clouds. 1 cloud + 1 cloud just equals another cloud. It's 1 cloud. Under mindfulness, all facts and information are conditional. And that is true of life. What you know about a situation and facts you know about one situation does not necessarily mean that it applies in a different condition or situation. What applies to one person does not necessarily apply to the other. It's conditional. So mindfulness really is about presence of mind, really focusing on what's going on and paying attention to what's happening there at that moment, in that incident. and gathering the facts and information about that particular situation. And again, there's a lot more to mindfulness than this. As it applies to interviewing, this is a great introduction. Please go out and do some reading and watch some videos and other stuff. Mindfulness is incredibly important, not just in this situation, but just in general in life. It's a really great something to practice. It's really good and positive. All right. Interview issues number 2 is the interviewer is a gatekeeper. Here's the approach that I have seen professionally for a very long time, that folks are interviewing looking for reasons to eliminate, to knock people out. Housing providers, case managers will interview looking for all the reasons why something won't work. That is the mindset they take. The information you're looking for is how do you make it successful. It may be that ultimately, based on the information obtained, that particular housing situation may not work. But we don't interview for that purpose. The purpose we interview for is to gather the information for how it will be successful. All addicts will fail on the road to recovery, that we know. So what are the triggers that this particular person has that will cause that relapse? We need that information. Once we have that information, what do we need to put in place in the housing situation in order to avoid those triggers and minimize the chances of relapse? Although we, again, all know relapse is going to happen. So, number 2, when the relapse does happen, what does that person need in place in order to get past the relapse and get back on the road to recovery? They possess that information. But when you approach it as positive, successful, what is it I need to know to help you, as opposed to, oh, you're a recovering addict who has failed a number of times. This isn't going to work because, this is a sober house and you're coming in as an active addict, is not the way that this works and is not the path or approach. This is gatekeeping. It is not interviewing. On that note, when we look at an interview room, sometimes we'll have a clock, we'll have a chair, and we'll have the interviewer, and they all have the one thing in common, that they're all tools but replaceable. I can pull the clock out of the room, I can replace a chair, and I can replace an interviewer. The one thing in an interview that cannot be replaced is the interviewee, because they possess the information. So the interviewer is as important as chairs to sit in, a clock in the wall to keep track of time, paper and pencil in order to take notes, but those can all be removed and I can still get the same information because the interviewee is who possesses it. So it's very important to keep in mind that the goal of the interview is to gather information from the interviewee to ensure a successful placement that is long-term and stable. So it does not, the interviewer is not the most important person in the room. They're a little more important than the clock, but they all have that same commonality. All right, interviewee issues. Brain suffers from egocentric bias. It loves itself. Our brains absolutely want us to appear in the best light, and the brain will do everything it can to make itself look good. This is associated with sports teams, political parties. Hey, when my team or party wins, it's awesome. I'm elated because that's us. And when we lose, it's everyone else's fault because it's not us. And just that bias that runs through life is clearly very common and prevalent. And it's going to find itself in an interview situation where you're trying to get someone to talk about trauma. I mean, you're trying to get someone to talk about some pretty heinous stuff that is going to be negative perceptionally, and they're going to be reluctant to do it, but you've got to get through it because you've got to be able to long-term stable housing. So personality is not something that is taught. If you are naturally gregarious, open, fun, and funny, people will talk to you all day long. If you are gruff, challenging, quiet, and don't have a sense of humor, you will have a tougher time of it. The issue here is that doesn't necessarily lend itself, again, to interviewing. People will have a conversation with you, but that does not mean they will give you information. People may chat with you all day long to make themselves look wonderful and terrific, but they're not going to give you personal stuff. So the most important thing to remember is you have a unique skill set. If you are gruff, challenging, and quiet, does not mean that you are a bad interviewer. As a matter of fact, I have had interview situations where I have been fairly open, and have maybe cracked a joke to make to relieve a tense situation, and it's been resented, and the interview's been ended on one occasion because they didn't like that I was joking around in their perception. So being gruff, challenging, and quiet in that situation would have been a better interview path to take than the one I did. The most important thing to remember is you need to understand your skill set and do not try to develop skills that you are not comfortable with. If you don't have a sense of humor and don't tell jokes, don't try. It comes across as fake, and it will absolutely leave an impression with the interviewee that you're not genuine. So you need to understand where your skills are, and you need to strengthen and work on those specific skills as your approach to interviewing. There is no one size fits all. There is none. There is only your genuine self and the approach you take to interviewing and the skills you develop in order to get people to be comfortable and divulge information they may not be comfortable sharing in any other situation. That's it. So don't think that because you don't have this spectacular sense of humor and you walk into a room and everyone gravitates over to talk to you that you can't interview. That's 100% inaccurate. You can absolutely interview and interview successfully. Personality plays a bit into it. It may accelerate in some situations, but quite frankly, it can work against you in others. Remember mindfulness. And just because you've had a success as this wonderful, open, gregarious, funny person interviewing, 20 times before, that 21st time, you may find that person is not appreciative and would want someone that is far more quiet and serious. This is a traditional interview situation. You clearly have someone who is dominant conducting the interview. You clearly have an interviewee who is secondary. This interviewee is, of course, going to put themselves in their best light. When we talk about that bias, this is full on. They are going to do everything they can because this other person has control of the situation, has demonstrated dominance of the situation. And you have that in housing because the person is unhoused and looking for housing. You have something they want. They're going to present themselves in that best light. This is a conversation. You have no way of knowing who the interviewee or the interviewer is, and you're going to get far more information out of this situation because, again, it is conversational. There is no dominance here. It is two people sitting and having a conversation. Now, that said, when it comes to interviewing in this area with dual diagnosed clients who are justice involved, there are some safety precautions that need to take place, but there are also security for the interviewee that need to be considered as well. The interview safety comes from my days at Child Protection and also in the military, the Army as a military police soldier. There are some interview safety considerations taking place when you are with someone who you are not sure if they may or may not become violent. You just want to take precautions. Having an unblocked exit from the room. Never put the interviewee between you and the door. Always have a clear path to get to the exit from the room. Just in case something happens, if someone becomes aggressive, someone begins to become, I would say, unmanageable, particularly female interviewers with male interviewees who may become sexually inappropriate. You want to just be able to leave the room. Now, again, I pointed out the desk creates that dominance situation. So having a barrier between you, maybe a table where you're sitting at the table together. It may be a coffee table. It is something that sits between you and the interviewee that creates an issue they have to get around or over to get to you. It gives you that few extra moments to get out of that unblocked exit. Recording is important to me because I don't always like taking notes in a conversation because I feel it slows the conversation or interrupts it. I'm focused on writing. I'm listening, but I'm not processing to ask the next question necessarily because I'm trying to capture that information accurately. This is one of the reasons why reporters will sometimes get quotes and other things wrong. They're trying to do three things at the same time. They're trying to hear what you're saying, write what you're saying, and formulate the next question, and that causes some dissonance in the brain. They are trying to listen to you at the same time they are writing, at the same time they are forming a question. So what they write down may not be accurate, which is one of the reasons why I record conversations. So, and I will explain to the person, the recorder goes on the desk and I let them know this is being recorded. This is for my notes. It's for me to use later to make sure that everything I get from you is accurate, that I don't write the wrong thing down. I'm still going to take handwritten notes, but I want to make sure everything I get this is very important to me. And it's very important to me we get this right. Having another person present is not uncommon. I am well aware that there are psychiatrists and psychologists that will actually have someone present because they're not sure of what might happen with the other individual. So it's a safety issue. But again, if you're uncomfortable, not sure what's happening, having someone else in the room can throw the environment off because now you've got 2-on-1, you've now got a dominant situation. How you introduce it, how you handle it, and what you do is critical in order to make sure that the person feels safe and that they're going to divulge information, but it may also be necessary for safety. When it comes to recording, as of September 2023, Minnesota says nay without the consent of at least one party to the conversation. Video recording, there are hidden camera laws. And I know some interview rooms in some places will have video recording for safety security to, in case something happens, you've got a recording. So please make sure that you have consulted with an attorney, that you are in compliance with the appropriate laws in Minnesota. As of September 2023, it was legal to record an oral or telephone conversation with the consent of one of the parties, as long as someone knows. However, and again, with no criminal or tortious intent. You're not trying to harm or do damage to the other person. But again, check with your attorney. But recording for me is important, and I always let the other person know it's happening. Some people just don't like it, don't want it, and that's fine. I will turn off a recorder. I will sometimes actually use that as a springboard to find out why. So I won't record that part of the conversation, but I'll use that as kind of a delve into, why is it you don't like recording? What is it about recordings? What's happened? Where are you at? Because that can open up some information as well. So that said, the interviewee needs to feel secure as well. The client needs to feel safe. It can't be an environment where people are running through, where there's chaos happening, where clients are out in the hallway yelling back and forth. You may feel, hey, I need to keep the door open for your safety, but that may make the client feel unsafe. They don't know who might come through the door, who else is in the building, what's happening. Emotionally secure. Again, that open door, if people can hear what they're talking about, they may shut down and not discuss it. They need, if you're, as an interviewer, being antagonistic, your body language is negative or aggressive, the tone of voice you're using is negative or aggressive, they may shut down and not be willing to share because they feel they're under attack, they feel judged, they are already sharing sensitive information. Again, that bias, that brain wants to look wonderful, and now they're under attack or someone's being aggressive towards them, it's not going to happen. And undistracted is really important. Having that window where they can look out and see what's happening outside. You're trying to get them to divulge sensitive or personal information, and they don't want to. Now they have an excuse or something, or a very cluttered office where they can look around and all the things there. And there may be triggering things to them that you're not even aware of in an environment. Pictures of family could trigger someone. Items from vacations, books or book titles may make someone feel insecure, and it definitely is going to be distracting while they're staring at all those things. So keep in mind that you are in control of that environment, and you have to be in control of the environment. You design the environment, you lay out the environment, so walk into the environment as an interviewee and look around to say, hey, if I was being interviewed, is there anything here that would distract me, that would throw me off, make me feel insecure? That opening conversation you have control over. You are introducing yourself, you are introducing the topic, you are greeting them, you have prepared questions based on their medical file or other information that you've acquired, and then during the conversation you're going to have improvised questions. They're going to come up based on the information that they have shared. You're going to be asking follow-ups, but you control those. So what is distracting to a client? Well, smells. Perfumes, colognes. Human beings have a large memory association with smells. You've experienced it. You walk to a room, you smell something. it brings back or triggers memory. Overwhelming smells, cloying smells, can also be very distracting and can be off-putting. Clutter in the environment. You may have shelves of books, you may have stacks of boxes, you may have mementos from vacations. People like to decorate, their monitor tops and sometimes their desks with things. That clutter can be very, very distracting to a client, particularly with processing issues. Bright lights can really throw folks off. We all like to be in a slightly darkened room with natural lighting. It makes us feel more relaxed. Bright lights can really, really set us off. And again, if you've got someone with cognitive or processing issues, that can create problems. Random movements can trigger some people, particularly justice involved. You don't know what their past or their history is. Sudden movements, random movements can really be distracting and can be triggering. Exterior windows are a big thing. If you've got an exterior window with no view, that's one thing. It allows natural light. If you've got an exterior window that actually looks onto a street scene or looks onto a farm, it looks onto anything that the client can use as an excuse not to answer your question or become distracted or become involved in what's happening out there rather than the room. Sounds, sharp sounds, loud sounds, environmental humming can sometimes set people off. Again, being aware of kind of what's there. You cannot necessarily control everything, but again, you can be aware of what's happening around and either prepare for it or at least discuss it. Be aware, particularly movement, your smells, things that you control, how that might impact someone that you're interviewing. Interview considerations with regard to complex trauma is something that Jared Brown has done extensive research on. He has articles and everything else. And keep in mind, again, throughout this, we're not doing deep dives in these subjects. I am making you aware of the fact that these things exist. Go out, watch videos, read articles. There's books on a lot of these things that you can absorb in and use to increase your skill set with regard to interviewing. But keep in mind that when you're interviewing, particularly in this population, that there are going to be cognitive limitations, and it can come from a number of different reasons. But cognitive limitations impact the ability to understand what you're asking, understand the language that you're using. The vocabulary may not be large, and they may have different definitions or not fully understand the definitions of words you're asking. And then just the processing. They're asked a question, it may take a little longer to process the question. Their ability to speak and explain may be limited. So going in understanding that there are going to be cognitive limitations in the clients you're interviewing is incredibly important. Their affective behaviors are going to impact you. They may have twitches, they may have behaviors, they may have other things going on. They're going to impact you as the interviewer that you can't be distracted by. Social issues and behavioral issues. They may have issues with authority. They may have issues with personal space. They may have issues with communication. Male clients may have issues with female interviewers. You don't know what's going to happen. You have to be prepared to address it in an expert, calm, and professional manner. But don't think that everyone, again, if you've got experience, you know that everyone's coming in to sit in front of you is going to, be pleasant and happy to be there. They're going to engage in that conversation in a meaningful and substantive way. You're going to need to be aware of what's going on with each client individually each time you sit down to interview them in order to build that rapport to get the information that you need. Again, Jared Brown's The Interview Considerations, Complex Trauma, all that information is out there. Please go out, read, watch, listen to podcasts. It's a ton of really, really interesting, important stuff. Ultimately, successful interviews are conversations. The interview is going to contribute about 10 to 15%, and that's directing the questions, initial questions, and follow-up questions in order to keep that interviewee talking. A great interview is where, someone talks for 40 minutes straight, and the interviewer just has to every once in a while chime in and go, well, what about? Well, how about? Well, just very quick questions that kind of refocus the direction, but that interviewee just keeps talking. If the interviewer is doing most of the talking, it is not an interview. It really is, it's information sharing. It's a conversation with the interviewer giving all their information out. The interviewee should be always dominant in that situation. The positive approach is incredibly critical. You are the authority and you have what they want. They absolutely are there. Maybe it is court ordered, maybe it is under their own volition, whatever it might be. They're sitting in front of you and they want what you have. So being positive as an interviewer is critical. You're already on not on level playing field. Taking any other approach is going to make it worse. This is not about looking for reasons to reject the person from the housing. Always remember that. You're not gatekeeping. This is to get them to open up and give you all their negatives so that not so you'll reject them. That's not what this is about. You're not looking to be aggressive or mean. You're looking to build that plan, create that map to move them forward. So when they falter, when they fail, you've got the resources already in place because they've shared with you what their triggers are or what situationally is going to happen and why they will fail. Really, if you approach this as they're moving in and I'm getting the information I need for when they're here day one, this is a much better mindset. It does not mean that if someone shares information that will cause the situation to fail, that you won't then say, hey, this is a problem. I do have a situation where I had a client who was living with a friend who had an issue, ended up nearly beating that friend to death. Case involvement, other police got involved. It was its own situation. There was a third witness. There was a third person in the apartment when it happened. That third person, we all found out what had happened because that third person was at their case manager's office location, and my client, the person who had physically assaulted the other person, came in because they received services there. And he immediately freaked out and said, I can no longer come here for services because I watched what this guy did and I cannot be even in the same building. If he sees me, he's probably going to come after me because I witnessed it and I know what he's capable of. So they actually had to change his services to a different provider because of the situation. So it is not going to mean that you're not going to find out in an interview that the person you're interviewing has a long-standing issue, problem, or there is background with maybe one of the other clients in that housing situation. So you could come across information that would serve as a barrier, but we don't go looking for that information. The approach is this person is moving in. We've got to get everything out of them we need in order to make sure that it is successful. By the way, just real quick, don't go over the rules of the placement at the beginning. This is off-putting, and it comes across as kind of authoritarian, where you're already sitting there going, these are all the things you're not allowed to do. Again, you're trying to get information out of them. You're trying to create an environment that is welcome and open so that they can share all the stuff they need to share. And if you start putting structural barriers in place during that interview, it's going to change the dynamic, and it really just mess it up. Now, the question comes up, hey, what if they ask about the rules? Perfect opportunity to discuss some of them, but really that's a perfect opportunity to find out why the rules are important. So when they ask you, hey, can you tell me what are the rules of the building and everything else? Ask them why that's important to them. Don't immediately start rattling off the rules, what the curfew is or what the meal situation and everything else. Ask them why it's important. Get them to talk about, why, what the rules are. It may be there are rules they may not be able to comply with. It may be the rules are very important. They're going to give you the information from their perspective on why they asked the question, and that could be key and critical to what's going to make it successful. They're going to provide it. So don't go in with hey, I'm going to give you all the rules. That's fine. When they come in for day one, sit them down and give them all that. That's perfect. But if they do ask about it, use that as a launching board to find out what it is about rules that's so important to them that they want to know. Let's get into the interview itself. You are going to initiate. This is a conversation between two adults, hopefully very casual. You're kind of at a table or you're on a couple couches with a coffee, whatever it is. You set yourself up situationally so that you are safe, but it's not a dominant conversation where you are like, I'm the authority and I'm in charge and I've got the thing you want and give me the information now, because that doesn't do well with this population. Don't take out a pen and paper. Don't start the interview. This is a conversation. Share a few personal stories. Please make sure they're genuine. I have had people who have taken stories that they like from other housing people or other case managers or even clients, and they kind of adopt the story as their own to tell it, and it comes across as very disingenuous. Feel free to share some personal stories. Don't overshare information, and don't share information you're not comfortable sharing. But, again, some of your personal experiences, and because you're having a conversation. The interview hasn't started yet. They will then share some information back, listen to what they're saying, and you can use that. Talk about your church, talk about your hobby, talk about interests. Tell a little bit of a story about yourself. Humanize yourself. You're not this, authoritarian figure who's there to take notes and make judgment on whether or not they get housing. You are a human being person who is there to have a conversation with another human being. Step 2, listen. They are the expert in their life and experiences. You are learning about them. They are here to teach you. You have education, you have knowledge, you have experience that you're going to use following the interview with the information you gather to create that map. But in the interview itself, you are not the authority, they are. Trust me, a large number of people do understand it. There's people rolling their eyes at me right now, listening to this going, yeah. There are people that do need to hear it, though. There are people that will walk into the room thinking, I am the authority and I'm going to get... It's like, no, that is not the approach to take for a successful interview to get this information. They need to listen to what they're saying. They are the authority. Again, silence is a motivator. Silence is a major motivator. People like to talk. They don't like silence. They will fill that silence. You will do it because you're uncomfortable. They will do it because they're uncomfortable. The goal is to outlast them. But again, there are those situations where, they're ordered or forced and they'll do the whole 30 minutes without saying a word. So everything's situational, but silence really is good. Sit and listen and don't say anything. They will fill that silence. Taking notes is key and critical. First of all, it validates what they're saying. Taking notes while someone is talking, really it makes them feel what they're saying is important, and it motivates them to speak. Now, what they may be saying may not be critical or important. They may be rattling off something about a best friend in childhood or something unrelated to what's going on, but they're talking. I have done grocery lists. I have planned a day. I have done other things while writing, but they can't see what I'm writing. So they, in turn, will continue because they're motivated. They're like, oh, wow, this is pretty important. You then may need to redirect the conversation. When it comes to notes, I have had clients, particularly as an attorney, say, I want to see your notes. At that point, if you've been taking good and effective notes, you're noting what they're saying. You're not sharing back necessarily. If I've done something like made a grocery list, or if I'm writing down professional notations, likelihood of success or legal arguments or anything else off to the side, I will not share those. And I'll explain why. That, on the page, this is what I have. But if I've got a page of just I've been writing down what they say, I might flip back to that and just show it to them. I was like, I'm just literally writing down what you're saying. These are the notes I'm taking. So you do have to be a bit careful if they ask to see it. What do you have on the page and how they might react? And again, explain. Don't say no directly out. That creates an authoritarian position that they may react negatively to, as a lot of our folks have issues with authority. So, explain, hey, I've taken notes, professional notes on here that I don't feel comfortable sharing. But, hey, here's a page. I don't have any here, so I can show you. This is how I'm scripting. This is what I'm doing. Tear the page out, fold it in half and show it to them. If they've got professional notes up. Again, sharing that, it's their words you're writing down. They want to know you're taking it seriously. So do share if you can, but be prepared if you've got stuff on the page that is not what they said and you've been taking side notes or anything else. Use active listening. For those of you not familiar with it, again, Launchboard, go forth, videos, podcasts, articles, everything else. But essentially, active listening is verbally or using nonverbal and verbalized reactions to what someone is saying. It's as simple as saying yes while they're talking. Active listening also, when someone is done, you rephrase what they've said to say, hey, just so I understand what you're saying to me, you were telling me about your last placement. You said in your last placement it was disrupted because there was someone there who you did not get along with. They were antagonizing you. This caused you to physically react. You feel it was unfair. Essentially encapsulating or summarize what they said back to them. And again, using notes if you need to. That validates what they've said. You now have accurate information because they're agreeing with your summary, or they're correcting it. They'll say, no, you didn't understand. And they'll correct a portion. You now have very accurate information. And they feel listened to. They feel encouraged. They're motivated because not only are you sitting and listening, not only are you taking notes, but you can repeat back to them a summary of what it is that they actually said. And they are blown away. Just one single instance of this in an interview can make an incredible difference in their willingness to share information. Because the other side to it, keeping in mind, from the interviewee's position, how many times have they told this story? If they've been in the system for 10 years, every time they've sat down with a caseworker, every time they've sat down with an attorney, every time they've sat down with a social worker, every time they've sat down with a clinician, every time they've sat down with a psychologist, they're telling the same information over and over again. And it's just become rote to just kind of repeat it out. And unfortunately, a large number of people do not use active listening, so they don't even know if they heard what they said. Because, hey, I said all this information, I said thank you. They might have taken some notes or recorded some stuff. And then, here's your med list, or here's your whatever your plan or whatever it is, and we're going forward. But they don't know that they've actually been listened to, that someone actually heard what they said. So that little simple act of saying, I want to make sure I understand what you're saying, repeating back to them their information in summary, can be stunningly important and can make all the difference in an interview. Get details. Oh, wow. So many people they'll prepare 5 questions, they'll ask the 5 questions, and they'll never ask a follow-up question. And that nothing drives me more nuts than a missed opportunity for information. For instance, going back to when someone says, hey, what are the house rules? What a wonderful opportunity to find out why rules are important to them, and what rules are important to them, and why. Getting those details. Your questions really are designed to do 2 things. They're designed to get that information, general information, out, and they're designed to get details. Well, that wasn't a good time for me. Well, what about it was not good? What could have made it better? In their own words, what would have improved it? Well, what else was happening in your life? That one response, hey, what happened in your last placement? Well, that wasn't a good time. Don't let that go, because now there's 3 questions that come up that'll drive down for details, because those details of what happened in that last placement are what are going to make this placement successful, because you're going to be able to prepare, but you're using their information. They're telling you what they're going to need in order to make it successful. It's all in the detail. They said it. They want to share it. If they're like, nah, I don't want to talk about it. Yeah, they do. They said it out loud. They want to talk about it. This is that silence thing comes back in. Give them the time and the space to kind of process it through and share it. The only time this may not be accurate is in a legal situation. I have had clients who will begin to talk about something and then begin to filter and stop because they're afraid of the legal ramifications. If I am their attorney, I can push in order to get them to talk about it. If I am not their attorney, if I am doing an investigation, or if I am doing something else, once they hit that point, they're not going to talk. Now, I've learned to ask, is it a legal issue? Like, are you afraid what you're about to say is going to create legal problems? They will 9 times out of 10 say yes. And then I know, don't pursue this. If it's just that they're uncomfortable sharing it, and again, that bias kicks in and they don't want to see themselves in a bad light, make a note of it, come back to it later, give them that silence, give them that space. If they started talking about it, they want to talk about it. It's just how do you make them comfortable enough to talk about it is that important part. And finally, you got to ask tough questions. This is not, at the end of the day, a coffee conversation with a client. You have to get that information out of them. Chances are you've probably gathered information from hospital intakes, from legal intakes. You've got records. You've got past issues and histories. You've got all that, so you know the questions you want to ask for, again, housing specific. How are we going to make this housing successful? And you need those answers. But hey, this is not an investigation. You're not a police officer. You're not a private investigator. You're not working for CPA or anything else. This is not about driving for information that you have to get. More flies with honey. You're trying to help them be successful in their housing environment long term. So the information you are gathering is beneficial to them for the future. This is going to help them maintain housing stability for years. So it's important that you get that information. A final one, I always, no matter who I'm interviewing and what, I'll always ask about family. And again, a lot of this is trauma-based, and so many of our clients are trauma-based in family, but some do have very positive experience, and we'll talk about it. So I don't just listen to the words when they talk about their family, their cousins, their uncles, their parents, whoever it might be, siblings. I'm listening to the tone, because how they talk about family, how they approach family is going to tell me about themselves. And it's going to tell me about their interpersonal relationships and how they approach them. It's going to tell me about how they're going to be in an environment with other people in a housing situation. How, not just the words they choose to talk about family, but how they talk about it. So tone and word choice and body language are all going to be very informative for what's going to happen when they get into that housing situation. So a key critical question to always ask, no matter what you've prepared, always have something about family with them. Be prepared. You may be a negative reaction. That may be a triggering question. So you don't know what you're going to get when you ask it, but you're going to get something, and it's going to be valuable information for you in this situation. Thank you very much for your time and for listening, and I hope you have a blessed day. This video is brought to you by Ramsey County Social Services and was made possible by a Mental Health Innovations grant. Thank you.